What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the College Underdogs Podcast. I am your host, Trey Smith. And first things first, let me apologize for missing the show yesterday and then for today if you're a YouTube viewer not having video. If you don't follow me on Twitter or you didn't see the message I put up on YouTube, I got sick over the weekend, didn't know what it was trying to power through it. Ended up finding out yesterday it was strep throat. I had fevers, chills, aches. I could barely get out of bed. It was the weirdest thing. Feel like I haven't had strep throat since I was a child. Got some antibiotic. Feel a lot better today. But tomorrow I'll be back in the studio. I'll be back with the video, regularly scheduled programming. But my apologies for missing yesterday's show, but I was sick. I put a note up on Twitter and on YouTube. I made a little post, so hopefully you saw it. Either way, back in action. Couldn't quite make it to the recording studio today, the area where I record today, but I wanted to get something out, get a show going, got a lot to talk about. And quite frankly, guys, I'm going to start with this JMU situation. You saw what I put on the thumbnail. Do we have a new mid-major sheriff in town? A new G5 sheriff in town? I am going to talk some about basketball as the season officially tipped off last night. The American Conference had an outstanding showing. I've got some thoughts on that later. But, man, this JMU thing. Okay, so if you aren't already aware, they sent a letter yesterday afternoon. James Madison University delivered a letter to the NCAA Board of Directors chair, who I believe is the president of Georgia, requesting relief from the NCAA bylaws restricting transitioning teams from bowl participation. So I got that from Barrett Sally. He put this up on Twitter. And he said, attached were 3 documents: the letter submitted to the NCAA Board of Directors, additional supportive talking points, and then a resume data profiling the case that JMU is the top group of 5 team in the country based upon current data as of November 6th, including all 0-loss, 1-loss, and 2-loss G5 teams. And we've been talking about this for some time now on this channel. JMU, they're 9-0. They have a Power 5 victory under their belt. They've beaten a team with the Power 5 victory under their belt. They play in, a tough G5 conference. And I don't think this story is going to go away unless JMU loses. So here's an interesting tidbit here. I'm going to read to you from ESPN, Mark Schlabach, ESPN senior writer. He has some actual quotes from the letter, I guess, that JMU sent to the NCAA. It says, the Dukes have embarked on this transition in ways that no other institution has since the transition rules changed 23 years ago, and that their student athletes have achieved an astonishing, unprecedented level of success during this period. Relief that allows our student athletes to participate in a bowl game as their play has earned is warranted. Our student athletes have done everything the right way, and they view the postseason ban in this instance as inexplicable punishment in light of the NCAA's stated priorities. As many commentators have noted, this is an opportunity for the NCAA to do the right thing for student athletes and recognize their exceptional efforts on and off the field. And the last thing I'm going to read from this article is down here. It says the NCAA Transformation Committee established right here. JMU officials wrote that due to the diligence and planning of our institution, we were able to confirm that we are meeting the updated requirements now, as far as the updated requirements from FCS to FBS membership. We have met full FBS membership requirements in both years of our transition and will continue to meet them in the future. And yeah, anyways, I'll link this article in the description if you want to go read it. And I'm curious to know your thoughts. As I read this, it sounds like one of the key arguments that JMU is trying to make is the fact that they feel like they met all the requirements in that so the transitional window is to give teams time to meet specific requirements as they transition from FCS to FBS. However, the argument it feels like, or it seems like James Madison is trying to argue, is we met all those requirements in year one, and now here we are in year two, which they believe they've made a case as the top team at the G5 level. So that's where I think they may have some grounds to stand on, is if they've met all the requirements of the transitional window in year one and they can prove that they don't need a second year, they could have a case to get the NCAA to lift the ban or waive. It's not really a ban. I keep saying ban. I don't mean that. But to grant a waiver for this second year. So I am curious to see how this plays out. I had a feeling this wasn't going to go away, especially when I talked about it several weeks ago when the the DA or Attorney General, who's also a JMU grad, but the Attorney General for the state of Virginia wrote a letter to the NCAA. I think the NCAA is going to have to continue dealing with these requests and lobbyists and things of that nature as long as JMU continues winning. Now, if you look at their schedule, they do have App State coming up. They've got Coastal Carolina coming up. So basically they finished the season with UConn, App State, Coastal Carolina. And man, if they keep winning, we could see the NCAA make the move. But we'll see. And then, on top of all that, I'm going to transition to basketball now. JMU basketball upsets the number 4 ranked Michigan State Spartans last night in overtime. And what a game that was. I had to catch most of that I caught some of the second half, but I was still out of it. During the American Conference games, as they were all kind of slotted in that same time frame, I was bouncing back and forth on ESPN Plus. And I don't know if any of you follow me on Twitter, but I was like, man, ESPN Plus needs a multi-view option. And I know some people had let me know that I guess if you have it through Apple TV, that you do get a multi-view option on ESPN Plus. Well, I don't have Apple TV. I just want to be able to log into my ESPN Plus, watch ESPN, whatever you want to call it, and select which 4 games or however many that I want to watch at the same time. Because it's very difficult on ESPN Plus to navigate multiple games at the same time. I guess it's not very difficult. It's just not as easy as when you're able to just flip through the channels. But JMU upsets Michigan State, beat them in overtime, I believe it was. And, man, that last possession, I did see that last possession in overtime. JMU knocked down a big-time three-pointer. Michigan State was down 1. They needed a stop and gave up the 3 right there at the end. So here we have it, man. We've got a JMU team who's 9-0, who's lobbying to get a waiver, because I'd be curious if they got the waiver where the CFP committee would rank them, because they definitely have a case. And now they've started their basketball season off with an upset over the top 5 team on the road. So I'll tell you what, man, JMU I think has climbed to the top of my American Athletic Conference expansion target list. I had Georgia State up there, but man, JMU, this is a very high quality program. But continuing in the basketball vein, it was a very strong showing for the AAC as they went, I think, 9-1 yesterday. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yep, they were 9-1. I caught a little bit of a lot. So I really wasn't able to just sit and watch really in depth any one game. I was trying to just touch each one, trying to get a little bit of each game. So I don't have like a lot of in-depth analysis. I know that ECU put up a 90 piece. That was good. Temple, I watched a little bit of Temple. They dropped 85 on the Maryland Eastern Shore. Obviously these are all these non-conference games, and you don't want to put too much weight into them. But I mean, UTSA, they were going back and forth with Western Illinois. Now the game that I did stop on was this Bradley UAB game, because that one went into overtime. UAB was down near 20 early in that game. They battled back. They fought back. And here's what I'm curious of. If you're a UAB fan or a fan that just happened to be watching the game, I could not believe they granted Bradley that timeout on, I guess, what was that second to last possession in overtime. When I don't know if he kind of knocked the ball loose or if he ran into him, but the ball was loose. UAB and the Bradley player both grab it. Should have been a jump ball, which at that point in the game, UAB had the possession arrow, and they granted Bradley the timeout. And that just, it's basketball officiating can be very subjective, and it's very in the moment, and the coach was right there in the official's face calling the timeout, and the official granted it to him. Bradley got to keep the possession, and I think that was that when they ended up winning. I think they got the layup on the following play with like 3 seconds left or something like that. So yeah, because UAB had just tied it up, and then it looked like they had gotten the jump ball, would have been their possession. They ended up granting Bradley the timeout. Bradley comes in, gets the layup with 3 seconds left, and that was what was crazy. I couldn't tell. I'd have to go back and watch that play, but there was a breakdown defensively there. I don't know if he slipped the screen or why that guy was wide open, diving to the basket at that point in the game, but anyways, Memphis, they started off a little sluggish against Jackson State, but then they got it together and they put up a 90-piece on Jackson State. And they don't even have Coach Penny yet coaching. I think, is it a 4-game suspension, something like that? Tulane was another one that put up a 90-piece. Their game with Nichols was a little back and forth, and then they were able to extend their lead there at the end. So, yeah, I'm excited about this basketball season. Wichita State, 76-59. I told you, I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know if this year what they're going to look like in conference play, but I'm telling you, with Paul Mills at Wichita State, I don't think it will take very long for them to be another top basketball program in the country, which only helps the AAC from a basketball standpoint. I mean, if you've got Memphis, you've got Wichita, if Temple can get back to being, a premier basketball program, I mean, I feel like there's a lot to be excited about. And then, of course, tonight, North Texas makes their debut. Rice as well. North Texas has Northern Iowa, man. I think that's actually, I think, got the potential to be a pretty good game. Northern Iowa is just one of those mid-majors year in and year out that they tend to have a pretty good squad. And so we'll see. I think they actually have a couple of American teams on their schedule this year. And then I think Wednesday is when FAU, top 10 FAU makes their debut, and then USF, I think, the day after that. But basketball season's off and rolling. Looking forward to it. If you happen to watch that UAB Bradley game, I'm curious to know your thoughts on that that final possession of overtime. And then now let me get to some football. So action-packed weekend. Key storylines from the weekend. I think we've narrowed it down to, those top 4 teams that are competing for that AAC championship game. As I said a couple of weeks ago, I think the UTSA at Tulane and the SMU at Memphis are going to essentially be the 2 games that determine who plays in the conference championship. The winner of each of those, I think, is who plays each other in the conference championship. So if SMU beats Memphis, UTSA beats Tulane, I think we see UTSA and SMU. That's who will be in the conference championship. And then vice versa. Memphis beats SMU, Tulane beats UTSA. We could get a rematch of Memphis and Tulane. The way UTSA's been playing, though, this is the team I think we expected from the beginning of the season. They're rolling right now. Then you've got Tulane is doing what they need to do to win the games. But if you look at their last couple of games, really since Memphis, they've been squeaking by. They have not made it easy, I should say. And so I don't know if you're a Tulane fan, if that's a cause for concern. Does that make you worry seeing Tulane kind of squeak by on some of these games that maybe you would have expected a larger margin of victory? Now, again, at the end of the day, a win is a win. And so do what you need to do. But, a 3-point game, ECU, 2-point game, Rice, 1-possession game, UNT. Now you got Tulsa and FAU coming up. I think we could maybe, this will be a week Tulane against Tulsa gets it back together and wins by a possession or two, kind of like they were doing earlier in the season when they were really putting teams away and it not being so close. Man, because that ECU, that was a scare. Then you had SMU. I said it, man. I said it this past week. SMU, Rice was going to be a tougher matchup for them. And I think the final score was indicative of that, and indicated that when you had, 36-31. SMU seemed like they were up by 2 possessions, but for most of the game, but then Rice always had an answer, and they would cut it back to 5, cut it back to 6. And so SMU did what they needed to do. That was good for them, I think, being that they've just been blowing teams out here lately. And I think it was good for them to get a close game in there. They've really, every conference game they've played this season, they've blown the team out. And so having a close game, I think, was good for the Mustangs. And now they've got UNT coming up. They got a nighttime game against UNT on ESPN2. I think, is that Friday? Is that Friday? I think it is, yeah. I think that's a Friday night game on ESPN2. Unfortunately, what I think could normally probably draw a pretty good crowd, I think will be hurt by the Texas high school football playoffs kicking off this Friday. But then they got the big showdown with Memphis, which, speaking of Memphis, they almost lost to USF. I think the last 2 weeks with Memphis, they've kind of been squeaking by a little bit like Tulane has been with their close call at UNT, their close call against USF. But they've got Charlotte this weekend. I think they'll take care of business. And then it sets up what I think will be a great game against SMU. So those are kind of the 4 that, from a conference standpoint, we're watching. Obviously, from a New Year's Six perspective, Tulane is in the driver's seat. I don't know. I'm curious to see what the CFP comes up with tonight as it pertains to how they've got like a Fresno State ranked, if they're even ranked, if they're in the conversation, because they just beat Boise. They're a team that if they go on to win the Mountain West, they could sneak in there. But I still like Tulane. I don't know. I mean, I even think SMU or Memphis with 2 losses could get it. And then I think UTSA's biggest hope of getting that with 3 losses was Boise State beating Fresno State. But we're just going to have to see how it plays out. I think the other storyline as it pertains to the conference is bowl eligibility. You know, the American Conference is a conference that typically puts, 6 or 7 bowl eligible teams in. And I think right now you've got 4 that are in. And honestly, you've got 2 others. I think we may see 6 at a max. We'll see 6. And I think the most likely team to be that 5th team getting a bowl bid is USF, because I like them against Temple and Charlotte, which, by the way, shout out Temple. Okay. They came to play against Navy, and I think Warner was back and threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, and showing, how much they've missed him during this stretch of games they've lost. But, there's a lot of teams that, mathematically could still make it. Now, I'm sure that's going to change a lot after this weekend. But for me, the teams that most likely have a chance are USF, because I think they beat Temple and Charlotte. And then I think FAU at Rice, that game, which should end the season. I think that's each of their last game of the season is FAU at Rice. Yeah, I think that game, whoever wins that game will be the 6th bowl bid for the American Conference, because I think Rice ought to beat ECU. No, I'm sorry, FAU I think could be. They got ECU, and then Rice has Charlotte. Yeah, we'll see. But it's looking like 6 teams is the max that the AAC is going to be able to get in. Seeing how the games play out this weekend, because you got teams like UAB, North Texas, Charlotte even, Tulsa, Temple. I mean, all these teams technically aren't mathematically out. They just have to pull off some upsets. Navy's not even technically out. So we'll see after this weekend who's still in the hunt. But I do think USF, they're 2 wins away. FAU and Rice are both 2 wins away. And I think USF has two games they can win left on the schedule. But that's it for me today. Again, I apologize for not having my video. I will be back to regularly scheduled programming tomorrow. And if you're listening on the streaming platforms, it doesn't probably make any difference to you because you're not watching. Well, I guess if you're on Spotify, I've been putting the videos on Spotify. But yeah, as always, like, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, comment right now, share this with a friend. And if you're listening on a streaming platform, leave this a 5-star rating and a positive review. I would greatly appreciate it. That's it for me today. College Underdogs Podcast signing